Welcome to the Sunday morning worship service of DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church in Naperville, Illinois. I am Bridget Coleman, a member of your Board of Trustees. We are so glad you are here, whether you're present in the sanctuary this morning or watching remotely. It is so good to be together. We welcome you to our church and invite you to get to know us better after the service. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold that there are many paths to truth and meaning, and we support one another on our spiritual and religious journeys while holding ourselves in covenant through our shared 7 principles. The mission of DuPage UU Church is to gather as an inclusive community, to grow in character, mind, and spirit, and to transform the world toward fairness, love, and compassion. Whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, wherever you are in the world, you are welcome here. If you are online, we invite you to greet each other through the chat. And if you are present here, I invite you to turn to someone you did not come with and greet them with a wave and a good morning greeting.
We light this chalice today for our first Unitarian Universalist principle. We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
Good morning. My name is Kristen Tang. I'm going to provide a visual description for anyone who might need it. I am a cisgender, middle-aged white woman with shoulder-length wavy hair. I wear glasses, and today I'm wearing a blue floral top and a blue skirt. I am a member of this church, and along with Mary Hamill, Jamie Smith, Karen Seymour, and our staff liaison, Steve Cooper, I am a member of DuPage UU Church's Accessibility and Inclusion Ministry Team, otherwise known as AIM, or the AIM team. The DUC AIM team strives to increase awareness of issues surrounding disability and disability rights, and to help make all church programs and spaces as accessible and inclusive as possible. Disability Pride Month takes place every year in July. This year, however, we are extending that celebration for another week. The first widely known Disability Pride celebration took place in Boston in October of 1990 to commemorate the passage of the landmark disability rights legislation, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, which had been signed into law on July 26th of that same year. In subsequent years, July became the time to not only celebrate the anniversary of the ADA becoming law, but also to remember and honor the accomplishments of disabled activists and the disability rights movement, to honor and celebrate the many contributions disabled people have made and continue to make to society, and to push back on the feelings of shame, pity, and incompetence so often associated with disability. Disability activist and co-founder of the Chicago Disability Pride Parade, Sarah Triano, defines disability pride this way. Disability pride represents a rejection of the notion that our physical, sensory, mental, and cognitive differences from the non-disabled standard are wrong or bad in any way. And it is a statement of our self-acceptance, dignity, and pride. It is a public expression of our belief that our disabilities are a natural part of human diversity, a celebration of our heritage and culture, and a validation of our experience. The Disability Pride flag, which is shown on the right, was designed by Anne McGill, a disabled woman, in collaboration with others in the disability community. It is a charcoal gray flag with a diagonal band from top left to bottom right corner, made up of 5 parallel stripes in red, yellow, white, blue, and green. But for those of you with the coloring pages, and there are some in the aisle, in the middle aisle there, you can color your flag however you like. The charcoal gray field signifies mourning and rage for the victims of ableist violence and abuse, and also represents rebellion and protest. The parallel stripes represent solidarity within the disability community, as well as all of its differences. Each color stripe represents different needs and experiences. Red represents physical disabilities. Yellow represents neurodivergence. White represents undiagnosed and hidden disabilities. Blue represents mental health, and green represents sensory disabilities. The diagonal positioning of the stripes represents a cutting across of the barriers that separate disabled people, as well as signifies creativity and light, cutting through the darkness. And now please rise as you are able in body or in spirit, and join in singing hymn number 1021 in the teal hymnal. The words will also be projected. Lean on Me, a song about the beauty of interdependence within beloved community.
Please join me in our covenant. We come together to affirm our relationship with one another, our shared commitment to our Unitarian Universalist principles, and to our DuPage Church community. We recognize our agency and our connective power, and we accept our responsibility to be bold and courageous in relationship with each other, so that we might transform ourselves and the world.
Our vision of beloved community is rooted in the relationships we have with each other, our world, and creation. Each week, we share our joys and concerns. Today's flowers are given by Diane Gelder in honor of Kat Gelder and Gil Gelder Brown, whose birthdays we celebrate this month, and in honor of Kat and Chris Brown's 15th wedding anniversary this month. Even when the cares of the world weigh on us, may we find joy in our connections with each other and in the pleasures that life unfolds. Let us care for one another and ourselves in all the ways we can. As we hold each other in our hearts and minds with all our joys and all our sorrows, whether spoken or unspoken, please join together in a moment of meditative prayer. Thank you.
It is time to gather. I am Steve Cooper. I am the Director of Religious Education. I'm about 6 foot tall, white, male, facial hair that's white, long ponytail that's gray, and thin. My story today is Different, A Great Thing to Be, by Heather Avis and Sarah Mincing. Scoot closer in and sit next to me while I tell you the story of my friend Macy. She can swim underwater, balance on logs, she can whistle, almost, and she has a pet dog. She reads books and jumps high like kangaroos do. She takes hip-hop class and prefers to wear blue. She's a fun-loving kid, much like you and me, but she's also quite different, a great thing to be. A bit small for her age, Macy doesn't talk much. She takes her time while others rush, rush, rush. She says, "Hi, what's your name?" to both strangers and friends, and sometimes sings on after her favorite song ends. While Macy believes that different is grand, others at times just don't understand. Some people stare rudely, and Macy's been told, "You don't belong here. You don't fit the mold." This kind of rejection can sting, it's true. But the thing about Macy, and the thing about you, is the brain in her head and the brave in her heart know her place in this world is not separate or apart. When those that are scared of different tried to keep Macy out, she just wouldn't give up, nor did she pout. She looked at the people on her left and her right, and with a great burst of courage yelled with all of her might, Hey you, look at me. We're a lot alike, you see, but we're also each different, which is a great thing to be. Others around her realized Macy was right. They all watched in wonder as her spirit shone bright. At her school, at the park, at the dance studio, she brought the beauty of different to each place she would go. People learned to admire Macy's outlook on life. Sameness is fine, but different brings light. With brave in their hearts and with Macy to guide, the different in each one glowed from inside. Now, it's your turn, dear one, to create a safe space. Be fearless, like Macy, and choose to embrace all that you are so others will see that different is truly a great thing to be.
And now I have the pleasure of introducing my very good friend, Julie Alessandri, who was gracious enough to say yes to doing a reflection today for us.
Good morning. My name is Julie Alessandri. I'm a cisgender white girl with wavy long hair and glasses. I'm wearing a peach top and light blue shorts today. I was born with congenital disabilities, which involve multiple body systems, including skeletal. Most of my childhood surgeries were to correct the irregular growth of my bones. And when I was 12, after much complaining of pain, my pediatric orthopedist agreed to scope my left knee. He found, contrary to x-ray, ulcers, growths, and rubble where the joint should be. He set out to identify the best course of action. This resulted in a total fusion of the tibia, fibula, and femur of my left leg. 2 years later, we did the same thing on the right. This means it's as if I have one long bone from hip to ankle. There are 4 scars visible on each leg. I mention the scars because only a few years ago, 30 years after the surgeries, I was at Edward Emergency Department with abdominal pain, and a nurse verbally attacked me saying, "Why do you have the blanket off? Do we have to see your knees?" I said, "I'm hot," and I was. I was wearing the hospital gown they'd given me, but I'd put the blanket off to the side because I was sweating, working very hard to fight the pain. Her reaction upset me because it implied that I was somehow using my scarred legs to get more sympathy or gain advantage. Believe me, there's no advantage. Her reaction further upset me because it told me that here, in a modern, sophisticated Western hospital, a trained medical professional who sees people with all kinds of different body damage still only saw my scars and not me. We're taught at a young age to identify things that are different. Sesame Street sings, "One of these things is not like the other." And something being different, I think, is neither good nor bad. In fact, it can be good to notice when something has changed. And humanity thrives, I think, with diversity. However, I believe that without ethical guidance, human nature may lead to naming things that are different as bad. And yet, representation matters. This is why what you do here at DUUC, having an accessibility and inclusion ministry and recognizing disability pride, is so very important. Making what is different about me compared to you, neither good nor bad. It simply is. By the way, thank you for listening and watching me stand next to the podium. It wasn't built for my 4-foot height. Thank you.
We have a question for you. And this is the part of the service where we're going to say, pull out your cell phones. Because we're going to take an online poll. If you can. So our question for you is, what is a word that expresses people's attitudes or feelings about people with disabilities? So we're not asking you specifically what your feelings are, but we want to get a sense of what you feel other people feel when they see people with disabilities. So the place that you go is really small on that screen. So I have a little bit bigger version that we're just going to tape right to the pulpit. So if you go onto your cell phone or iPad or any device that you have that is connected, and go to Menti.com, and it's going to ask you for a code to put in, and the number is 52751068. Put that in there, and then it's going to show you this question, and we're going to start building a word cloud. And you can enter up to 3 words separately, and if you want to add more, it'll go back around and ask if you want to add more questions again. If you don't have access to a device, or you prefer to just write it down, raise your hand and I'll bring you a note card. Maybe Gil can come up and help me too. Raise your hand, we'll give you a note card, pencil, write it down on there, and we'll run it back up here, and Kristen and Mary and I will put it in, and your words will show up also. Gil, you want to come up and give me a hand? Can you help me? There's people with their hands raised. Give them a note card and a pen or pencil. And then wait for them. We're going to do this during the offering, so you're going to have time, so don't feel like you're rushed and you got to get it in right now. But we're going to start watching our word cloud build. So the giving of our treasure is how we reciprocate the many gifts we are given by this community. Your contribution supports the programs and operations of DuPage UU Church. Giving is also how we live our values in the world. Each month, we share our offerings with an organization nominated by the congregation and selected by the special offerings team. During the month of June, $1,738 was collected for Youth Outlook. Thank you for your continuing generosity and support. During August, the special offering will benefit Working Bikes, nominated by David Gorman. Working Bikes collects 11,000 used bikes annually for reuse locally and internationally. Volunteers and employees repair 2,000 of these bikes for donation in the Chicagoland region through charitable partners for homeless individuals, immigrants, veterans, and children of low-income families. Working Bikes is an incredibly efficient and effective grassroots organization that makes great use of hundreds of volunteers and the free resource of used bikes to empower people with free, affordable transportation throughout the Chicagoland region, including DuPage County. For more information, visit their website, workingbikes.org. The offering is given and received in a spirit of generosity and gratitude.
So as we're still entering words, I will read some of them to you because I know the small ones are a lot harder to see. But we have, well, some of the big ones maybe you can see: uncomfortable, pity, condensation, different, fear, discomfort, sympathy, and some of the smaller: judgment, frustration, impatience, confused, weird, dismissive, invisible, annoyed. Some tiny ones: acceptance, challenge, slow, overlooked, suspicion, misunderstood, in awe of my power, thankful, hopelessness, distrust, lesser than. The words associated with disability found in our word cloud are for the most part the norm. The historical and prevailing attitudes about disability are negative. In the United States, disabled people have historically been viewed at best with pity, sometimes with sainthood, and at worst with disgust. For a long time, disability was, and I suppose by some, hopefully if just a few, are seen as a punishment from God. Disabled people have been institutionalized, sterilized, experimented upon, abandoned, and even killed by their parents and caregivers. During the 19th and 20th centuries, several US cities enacted so-called, quote-unquote, ugly laws that banned people from public spaces who were deemed, and I quote, diseased, maimed, mutilated, or in any way deformed so as to be an unsightly or disgusting object or improper person, end quote. You could be arrested for being disabled in public. Chicago did not repeal its ugly law until 1974. With the passage of the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act in 1975, later renamed the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and with the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990, people with disabilities gained greater access to education and the workplace. While structural and institutional ableism have certainly not been eliminated, disabled people in the U.S. now have many more protections under the law than they did 50 years ago. Attitudes about disabled people, unfortunately, have not improved nearly as much. According to Harvard researcher Dr. Tessa Charlesworth, quote, negativity toward the elderly and people with disabilities has shifted by less than 5% since 2007. In fact, change is so slow that forecasts suggest it could take well over 150 years for either bias to reach neutrality. So, can you begin to see why disability pride is so necessary? If the prevailing attitudes about disability are negative and do not seem to be improving, imagine how easy it is for disabled people to internalize those negative attitudes and stereotypes. As self-described, white, disabled, genderqueer author Eli Clare so eloquently explains, pride works in direct opposition to internalized oppression. The latter provides fertile ground for shame, denial, self-hatred, and fear. The former encourages anger, strength, and joy. To transform self-hatred into pride is a fundamental act of resistance. People who have lived in shame and isolation need all the pride we can muster, not to mire ourselves in a narrowly defined identity politics, but to sustain broad-based rebellion, end quote. In his book, Disability Pride, Dispatches from a Post-ADA World, Ben Matlin recounts the story of vlogger, with a V, and author Shane Burkaw. Burkaw, who has spinal muscular atrophy, explained that in the past, when he would go to the beach, he would keep covered up with long pants and a shirt because, quote, I was programmed by society to be ashamed of the way I look. And while it was not easy, Burkaw gradually transformed his feelings about his body from feelings of shame to feelings of pride and confidence. On camera and shirtless, Burkaw explained in his transformation in a video entitled I Was Ashamed of My Body to his hundreds of thousands of YouTube subscribers. Burkaw appears to have embraced Sarah Triano's definition that, quote, disability pride represents a rejection of the notion that our physical, sensory, mental, and cognitive differences from the non-disabled standard are wrong or bad in any way, and is a statement of our self-acceptance, dignity, and pride. Just as disability pride can be a form of resistance against an ableist society and internalize negative feelings, it can also be a way to celebrate the disabled individual's many strengths and accomplishments. These achievements are not necessarily the result of the person, quote unquote, overcoming their disability, but can come directly from the experience of living as a disabled person. Again, from his book, Disability Pride, author Ben Matlin explains how living with a disability can enhance skills such as patience, stillness, empathy, creative problem solving, and, if the person has personal caregivers, employee management. In the introduction to an article about the best books for and by people with disabilities, disability activist Daphne Frias writes, As a proud disabled Latina, I am constantly reminded of the remarkable qualities that my experience with cerebral palsy has nurtured within me. It has shaped me into a person who is empathetic, resilient, and highly adaptable, just like the many others in my diverse community. Similarly, in the book, the hashtag Actually Autistic Guide to Advocacy by Jennifer Brunton and Jenna Jensic, Irish author Frank L. Ludwig attributes several of his strengths to autism. He explains, I certainly attribute my creativity to autism, be it in writing, developing ideas, or problem solving, because autism enables us to think originally or outside the box. My ability to focus intensely on something of interest, such as researching a topic or writing a poem without taking a break for hours on end, is also a result of my autism, end quote. Many disabled writers, artists, and activists echo this idea that they have achieved success not despite their disability, but directly because of their lived experiences as disabled people. Disabled people should and do take pride in the imagination, innovation, and outside-of-the-box thinking they've developed to live and succeed in a world that is not always accessible or inclusive. But, as an aside, we most definitely should continue to work toward a more accessible and inclusive world. Amen. Artist and writer Riva Lehrer expresses this very well. In the epilogue to her book, Golem Girl, a memoir, Lehrer writes, quote, disabled people are experts in finding new ways to do things when the old ways don't work. We are a vast think tank right in plain sight, a bottomless well of ingenuity and creativity. If we must argue for our worth, then this is worth incarnate. If we must argue for our worth, that phrase gives me pause. Should disabled people or anyone have to argue for or prove their worth? I don't want to leave you with the idea that disability pride is about proving that disabled people have value. As I read to you earlier, Sarah Triano's definition of disability pride includes self-acceptance, dignity, pride, and the celebration of disability culture. Disability pride is about being proud of your life and who you are and not having to justify your existence. However, historically, proving their worth is exactly what disabled people have had to do. In order to gain civil and human rights, they have had to get the powers that be to see them as human, with lives worth living and not as, quote, unsightly or disgusting objects or improper persons as defined by the ugly laws. Another very important part of Sarah Triano's definition of disability pride are the words proclaiming that, quote, our disabilities are a natural part of human diversity. The key words for me here being natural and human. In Golem Girl, Riva Lehrer describes an anecdote that exemplifies Sarah Triano's words well. Lehrer and a colleague gave a lecture called Beauty and Variation. By describing the many variations within the human body, they agreed that, quote unquote, normal is an illusion. Among other variations, they described and showed slides of the 13 standard positional variations of the human appendix. 13! When she had walked out on stage for the lecture, Lehrer, who is born with spina bifida, has a curved spine and walks with a pronounced limp, carried a sign that read, variation. Lehrer's able-bodied colleague carried a sign that said, human. After they had finished their talk on the myriad natural variations within the human body, Lehrer and her colleague picked up their respective signs, turned to walk off stage. But after a few steps, they stopped, took a long look at one another, and swapped signs. As humans, according to our first principle, we all have inherent worth and dignity. In her reflection on the first principle, the Reverend Dr. Rebecca Ann Parker writes, "We celebrate the gifts of being human, our intelligence and capacity for observation and reason, our senses and ability to appreciate beauty, our creativity, our feelings and emotions. We cherish our bodies as well as our souls. We can use our gifts to offer love, to work for justice, to heal injury, to create pleasure for ourselves and others." That all sounds great. We should all celebrate and take pride in the gifts we have and what we can bring to the table. But what if we can't do any of those things? What if for us being human does not include any of those gifts? What if our intelligence or our senses are diminished? What if we don't have the energy to work for justice? What if there are times when we don't even have the bandwidth to give or receive love? Do we still have worth then? In an interview on NPR this past February, author and disability justice activist Alice Wong talked about disability and self-worth this way. "Our society has an aversion to death, aging, suffering, sickness, and disability. What if we acknowledge them as natural parts of the human experience rather than something to be eliminated or avoided at all costs? Life is not binary, healthy or unhealthy, disabled or non-disabled, low or high quality. We can and should embrace vulnerability, interdependence, and not see them as weaknesses." Wong continues, "The other day, Zeke Emanuel, a doctor and bioethicist, tweeted that living too long can be debilitating, and that people over 75 have ineffectual and feeble lives. Eugenic attitudes like his demonstrate how some people are valued more than others. Disabled and chronically ill people have constantly pushed back against these narratives, having to defend their right to exist. Productivity does not make a person inherently valuable. Everyone is valuable." End quote from Alice Wong. Everyone is valuable. The inherent worth and dignity of every person. In Unitarian Universalism, these ideas are not controversial. I don't think most of us would argue against them. But Alice Wong is absolutely correct in saying that society values some lives more than others. One need only look back over the past couple years and remember how many times a top health official or a government official, quote unquote, comforted the general public and justified lifting virus mitigation strategies by assuring us that as long as you're vaccinated, it's only the immunocompromised or those with significant other health risks who are dying of COVID-19. I doubt those with chronic illnesses felt particularly valued listening to those statements. Something to think about. Back to Reverend Dr. Parker's reflection on the first principle. She goes on to quote Rabbi Abraham Heschel. Rabbi Heschel writes, "Just to be is a blessing. Just to live is holy." For me, this is the answer to the question of whether or not we need to prove our worth. We can all, disabled and non-disabled alike, take pride in our humanness. We can value interdependence and diversity. We can feel confident in our worth simply because we are. No proof necessary. So let us celebrate this extended Disability Pride Month as an act of resistance to shame, to pity, to incompetence, and to all the other negative stereotypes associated with disability. Let us rejoice in the past victories of the disability rights movement, but continue to work toward disability justice. Let us truly appreciate the strengths that can be gained as a result of living with a disability. And when you think of words associated with disability, I hope the first word that comes to mind now is human. May it be so. And now please rise as you are able in body or in spirit and join in singing hymn number 1053 in the Teal hymnal, How Could Anyone? We will sing through it 2 times.
Wild Emancipation for all of us is an excerpt from the book Sitting Pretty, The View from My Ordinary, Resilient, Disabled Body by Rebecca Taussig, a writer and teacher from Kansas City. When I was small and just learning how to do life in my body, I didn't hesitate, didn't hold back, didn't worry how it would look, didn't look for cues or ask for a line. My imagination ruled. I was entirely free to be driven by the innovation my body inspired. This is the wild emancipation I wish for all of us. A world where we all are free to be, to move, to exist in our bodies without shame. A world that isn't interested in making all of its human operates in the exact same way. A world that instead strives to invite more, to include more, imagine more. That world sees the humans existing on the margin and says, you have what we want. What barriers can we remove so that we can have you around? What do you need, and how can we make that happen? We extinguish the light of this chalice, but not the light in our hearts. Until we meet again, may the warmth of our community carry you.